Hello, everybody. James here, and for the fourth time, Shane Douglas is returning. I won't give him the big intro this time, but how you keeping, man?
I'm doing well, man. How about you? I understand you had some surgery, huh?
Yeah, I told you.
Fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know what? Actually, because we're doing the whole surgery thing, we were having a chat as we always do beforehand.
Yeah.
I was thinking. Well, I was telling you the medication I'm on. I think I'm on day 9 after the surgery. This is I'm sure people know by now. Cry about it enough. So I've had ACL surgery. They managed to rescue my meniscus, which is the big thing. But the other thing that I didn't realise is that they drilled a hole in my shin, which is causing issues as well. But I was talking to you as well just before. We were talking about various injuries, various operations we've had over the years. What's your worst injury? What's the one that really sort of devastated you, man?
Like I told you talking before the show. Anytime I didn't realize it's the first time I had my first shoulder surgery. I never even had a tooth pulled or filled at that point, and woke up from it, and I was fine until I thought, like, mind any pain. And as soon as my brain engaged, my whole body started convulsing in pain. It was extraordinary. Anytime you do, and this is the orthopod to be that I prepared for and didn't go for after I got there. Anytime you have bone surgery, bones are extremely innervated, and so it's, as you found out, incredibly painful. But the worst injury I ever had, thank God I didn't require surgery for, was the fractured palate. The roof of your mouth, you see the line that goes down the center of your mouth, that's your palate up under there, it's cartilage. And Sabu had done a dive of enziguri on through a table, a planche, through a table, but the table didn't break. From the ring apron to the railing, and landed here. So it almost knocked me out. It didn't go completely out, but when I woke up, it was not extremely painful at that point, so my face hurt. And that night, it felt like these 3 teeth were bad. I wanted them yanked. I was thinking like yanking them. I had bags of ice and just like holding there. And finally went and had the first dentist I went to gave me a shot of Novocaine thinking that would calm it down. Well, when he stuck the needle in the roof of my mouth, it just set it right off again. And I almost blacked out driving home. So my ex-wife's mother's next door neighbor, friends of the family, she worked for a maxillofacial guy. And he was leaving to go to Paris, as I remember. And he said, run him over real quick. And they did a pan scale. And he came walking out. I'm sitting in the waiting room. He came out and grabbed my headlight and said, do not open your mouth. And the way they fixed that is mine was non-displaced, so it broke and went back like that. If it does this, then the way they fix that, they pull your lip back, cut your lip, and then they pull your face back and fix it from over top the wire. And I was like, man, that sounds way too much like Frankenstein. So people say like on a scale of 1 to 10, that was a 35. It was incredible, the pain.
Do you know, I was saying to you this before as well, I finally started getting around to watching Dope Sick, and the sign that they gave you, the little piece of paper that says with a happy face to a frowny face, 1 to 10, where's your pain? I always find a bit, man, how they disseminated all that stuff through the hospitals and stuff. I know we're not talking about Dope Sick, but what was your first major injury then that you just remember thinking, oh, that's icky, and you just never suffered that kind of thing before?
Again, in wrestling back then, like, we were trained to, because you didn't get paid if you didn't work, so you go unless you really, really can't. And the first injury that I had that necessitated a hospital trip was in UWF wrestling Mark Laurinaitis, Animal and Johnny Ace's brother. I think he went by Terminator.
Yeah.
And I did a Lou Thez on a Thez press. And when I did, the way he came down, I didn't feel it. But I'm on him punching me, he throws me off. And when I went to get up, I went to make fists, and my hands didn't feel right. I looked down on this finger; these 2 fingers were like back like this, and I just distinctly grabbed them and like sort of pushed them under. Didn't feel it. They would come to the dressing room, and once you calm down and get back, the adrenaline's not flowing. That was like the first that I was in a cast for a while. There's always those kind of little injuries. Strains, sprains, even like, fractures and stuff you can tape up. But the first serious injuries to me were in WCW. Whenever oddly enough, Bluefield, West Virginia, right down the road here, I was wrestling. might have been a tag, but it might have been a single with Bobby Eaton. And the Bluefield building is it's set up like an arena, but it's a lot smaller, probably a third of the size of a regular arena. And as a result, they had slid the mats in. They were only, instead of like the 3-4 feet they usually are, it was only about 1.5 feet out. And I used to do a thing where I would vault to the top rope, drop kick the baby to the heel. Bobby would take the bump to the floor. I'd run and vault to the top rope and do a cross body to Bobby on the floor. Always phenomenal. Just everyone knows my love for Bobby Eaton. But because that kind of physics, 230-pound guy coming down. When I hit him, he went straight down, and my knee pad had just happened to work down during the match. Didn't realize it, and my knee ground into the concrete, and it didn't break or anything, but there was a ton of blood clots, and I had to go to Georgia. Which getting, I'm in a straight leg brace, so getting in my car and driving to the airport, getting through the airport, getting on the plane was pretty tough. And then I get there, and my doctor in Pittsburgh said, like, he wanted to settle down for a couple of days so he could get a good look at it. And told me, like, he knew I was going to Georgia to see WCW's doctor. And he said, okay, it's fine. Let him examine you. No procedures. So this guy comes in, he's looking at it and said, okay, hold on. He gets a needle out. Whoa. So my doctor said, and he had a couple nurses come in. It sounds like I'm making this up. A couple male nurses came in and they put their hands on my shoulders and stuff. He sticks the needle in. Now it takes Novocaine, 4, 5, 10 minutes to kick in. He stuck the Novocaine in, or Xylocaine, whatever it was, turned around, put it down, picked up a scalpel, turned back and whoa, stop. And he cut, and then he took this great big hook needle and stuck it in there, and he pulled this big bloody glob of a clot out.
Oh.
And, so I was fine after that, but that was, I wasn't able to wrestle for a couple of weeks. So over the years, I think my career, it's 29 broken bones, 18 surgeries, 11 concussions, but only 2 of them, high-grade concussions. And that was plenty. I want no more. I do crosswords every day and stuff to make sure the brain's still working. But, I've seen the after effects to a lot of these guys.
I had one injury that you had that I didn't realize until very recently, is that I think you suffered some sort of larynx injury when wrestling Razor Ramon. What was the circumstances of that? Was it clothesline or something?
Yes, we were in Canada.
Was this the Winnipeg pay-per-view?
I believe so, yeah. And I know we were in Canada, so I won't use any names, but one of the guys let me, I better not say anything about this because they'll be able to go back and see the records. Let's just say we did something a little less than legal, we being the boys in the health system. But I didn't at that point, this is before my medical school training. I had no idea you could fracture your larynx. And same thing as the roof of my mouth, the larynx has a bunch of C rings reversed, and those cracked, and it changed my voice. And to this day, I still can't get up over a certain, how some people get their voice up just jokingly high. I still can't do that. But for about a year afterwards, I sort of sounded like Johnny Ace, and I think that's what Johnny had happen, which permanently altered his voice.
Crikey. So, I was thinking it was I didn't know if you smoked back in the day or something like that. I thought that was the way to change your voice, but just have some terrible trauma.
Yeah, and not fun. It's, as you can imagine, you swallow about 1,000 million times a day, right? It's constantly swallowing spit or whatever. And every time it was just, think of the worst sore throat you ever had times 10. And that was, sipping water, whatever. It was awful for I'd say about 3 to 5 days, really, really bad pain. And then sort of waned, and then the voice issues.
Did you fracture the hyoid there as well, or did that get away?
No, the hyoids are bones on the sides of the, very fine little tiny bones, and easier, mostly when somebody gets strangled, that happens. Luckily, mine was this. So when you feed into a clothesline, you turn your face slightly, but you're still getting the Adam's apple pretty much straightforward.
Okay, right. So I told you just before we started, I've got the most random assortment of questions from the 90s and 80s and everything else. Some from fans, some from the top of my head, because I knew you'd always come back for another one. And I've just written some questions on my phone just throughout the month.
Like a COVID virus. You can't get rid of me.
Like fungus on a shower curtain. So I've got a ton of stuff to ask you. We'll see how far we get through. And Here is something that I'd written down. And from the Clique This podcast, this is Kevin Nash's podcast, he said when pressed on if the group had used their influence to ruin anybody's career, Kevin Nash said, I think that maybe Scott got pissed off at Shane Douglas. And that was it. That's the only one, that's the only career that they'd admitted to having a hand in maybe not helping as much as they could do. Does that ring true to you, or what's the list of people you think?
Well, yeah, I think it was far more than me. I know at one point Dustin to an extent, and I guess if you like quantify it out, you can say, well, Dustin became Gold Dust and had a great career with that. There were several people back at that time. Let me say this about Kevin. Kevin and I have always gotten along very well, even during the time of the Clique. And since, I just saw him the other day at the Square Circle Expo in Indianapolis, and didn't get a chance to talk to him. I was, trying to get, around to say hello to the guys and get back to our table. But looks great. I didn't get a chance to talk to him about his son. I really don't want to bring that up, because that's a several-minute conversation. Look, my heart goes out to the guy. I can't even begin, being a father, imagining what a horrible hell that must be. But he and I have always been good, even like during that time. And after, he would say to me, like, hey, we're good, Art, because in fact, I think Ricky and I had worked with him and somebody before that when he was doing the Vinny Vegas thing and the other gimmicks down there. And, we always talked about basketball and, all that kind of stuff. But he had come to me at one point, and said, I asked him, hey, how's Scott doing? And he said, I don't know. He said, I just got to the point where he couldn't do it anymore, he said. But I'd heard he had said some complimentary things in his podcast. And it didn't surprise me because, Kevin, I think unbeaten all that is a good guy. When you put yourself into that, and again, that Clique stuff is a million gazillion miles away to me, behind me. And I've been able to forge out a pretty good career and legacy in the industry, and I'm proud of that, having never been at a WrestleMania. In the WWF, WWE, it is a different universe. I always joke about it, like Vince, apparently the physics fall up there. But it changes people. I think if you're going to go there and be successful there, and I've seen it without mentioning names with more than one or two people that I knew intimately well prior. And I think that you just have to get into that mindset. I don't know if it's an overt thing or a covert thing, but clearly it changes the people that go there. But, it's, I think it's to anybody that's a fan of the business that follows the business. I think it's pretty obvious that the Clique had lured over there, including all the way up to the point of them leaving and they're doing the Madison Square Garden thing. That was them flexing their muscles, that there's nothing Vince can do to stop them. I mean, he could have, but they knew he wouldn't. And, it's a bad chapter of wrestling history, because I think, if promotion A, whatever that promotion be, takes time to hire James, and they're obviously bringing you in for some acumen that you have. They're not going, well, I don't know who this guy is. And, he's okay in the ring, and we'll just bring him in. They don't do that. They bring you in for a specific reason. And I think in '95, when you look and see what I've been doing in ECW, I think it's arguable that I was probably the hottest heel in the industry at that time. But getting there and being disallowed to do the things that character had done to become that hottest heel in the business. Then, of course, them being able to set their sights. Vince clearly knew what was going on. So there's this eternal question, was it a plan by Vince, some evil, sinister, by the way, his new mustache. It's we talk about that in a second if you want, but
oh god, yeah, it's the fact that he's dyed his eyebrows that I find most sinister. I always find the 77-year-old man dyeing his eyebrows is a problem.
Yeah. Look, I'm hardly one to talk about dyeing stuff, but I think they reached a point. And to be honest with you, I don't want to sound like a strange person or something. I think Vince, with the gray hair, the short hair, in great shape, there's a distinguished look to that. Everybody knows he's an older gentleman. Doesn't mean he's not a vital human being. It doesn't mean he's not an intelligent human being. But when I first got that picture sent to me from one of my podcast partners, I laughed and said, who's the imitator? Because I honestly thought it was somebody imitating Vince McMahon. And the guy, my partner went back, that's him. I went back and I went, oh my God. It, yeah, straight. I was reading some of the comments online about it. And I guess there's sort of a universal feeling that, like, the one thing, and you probably won't get this, and people in Britain wouldn't get it, I don't think. There used to be a cartoon on in the 70s, Saturday mornings here in America. And there was a character on there called Snidely Whiplash.
Oh, yeah.
Like the ultimate heel.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
we got it. We got it.
So that's the first thing I said. Like, it's Snidely Whiplash, or a 1970s soap opera star in America.
Yeah, you know what? I find it so great that, like, all these NDAs he signed and stuff like that, and then he sort of like disappears from the public eye, and he comes back looking more like a pervert.
I'm glad you said that, and I didn't have to. But
he does.
The thing that I found strange with the whole, and I forget the parent company name. What is it?
Endeavor.
There you go. Them buying, I don't find it strange them buying. I mean, I don't know where it is now, but at one point it was the 6th most recognizable brand on the planet, which is astounding. I don't know of any other company that would have proof of the CEO embezzling money from the company, then being asked to come back and run that company. I just can't imagine that. I've always thought that the whole thing was some kind of a sham story, whether he had to go get some kind of surgery done or something, because it all just, in my experience in life, things aren't neat and pat and everything just falls into place perfectly. Hunter's out with a heart attack. Stephanie's leaving, but then has to stay. Shane is gone. Rule number one is, don't be in the palace when you're going to try to assassinate the king. But then he waltzes right back in, and he's right back in charge. There may be an example out there. I'm unaware of any examples of a company that big, of somebody that publicly known, invited back to run the company after stealing $20 million, even whether they paid it back.
Well, I can tell you why. Is because he made it very clear that there could be no sale of the company without his say-so. So therefore, the company was sort of over a barrel, as it were.
Well, wouldn't you be hesitant to buy something if I said, I'm not selling it to you unless you bring me back? I'm the guy that stole $20 million. I'd be a little leery of that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's UFC. They've got Dana White on their side. So I mean, as CEOs go of sports companies, I mean, they're pretty similar in quite a few ways. Maybe a couple of ways they don't want to be similar to. But as far as your favourite celebrity that looks like Vince McMahon, I think Clark Gable. I've heard quite a few times. Yeah. Vincent Price. I've heard quite a few times. Yeah. And
loved Vincent Price.
You see, the only thing I can do from the Vincent Price thing is the Thriller. The beginning of Thriller.
Well, yeah, that would be before that. He was like a pretty prodigious horror movie guy here. By the way, one of the great movies from him, I forget something. There's other words to it, but Dr. Phibes, Phibes, The Indomitable Dr. Phibes, or something like that. Incredible horror movie.
Oh, jeez, I can't deal with horror movies. Right, my brother sat me down and forced me to watch The Shining when I was 9, and That's a problem film to watch, even if you're an adult. You know what I mean? Not when you're 9. You can't understand why these creepy twins are coming towards you and blood's coming out of the lift.
Yeah, right.
Oh, dude, I tell you what, I'm going to get back to the question. I could talk to you with films all day. Let me tell you. Now, we mentioned the Winnipeg pay-per-view earlier. This is In Your House 4. This is like September '95, something like that. And there's a lot of stories that come out of that or go into that show. Obviously, you are given the Intercontinental Championship. You lose it to Razor Ramon the same day. The main story I'll get to in a minute, but the second biggest story is that, do you remember Billy Gunn turning up that night with the exact same haircut as you?
No.
Oh, all right.
No, honestly, I don't. When you're at those buildings, especially for pay-per-views, you sort of have to walk around with blinders on, because there's a lot of stuff here, especially in WWE or F then, they've got all these sound, I guess, like skiffs set up in the back where you got to go do this interview, do that interview. You're going pretty much during the day. But I have to go back and look now that you say it.
Yeah, he turned up because you had that sort of like it's sort of like a half mushroomy kind of thing, with the blonde, and he turns up with the exact same haircut. I just wondered if you just ever noticed that. Let's talk about the main story. And I've never asked you this before, but I've heard you talk about it before. So basically, I'm just looking for the exact same answer. Your reaction when Shawn Michaels turned up with a lot of bruises on his face and that very colourful leather jacket, and you basically heard that he was in a bit of a scuffle. What did you hear first when that news filtered to the locker room?
Well, for 2 weeks prior to that pay-per-view, we were on the Germany tour, half the crew. Kevin, Scott, I believe Hunter, Just Incredible, me, Owen. There were a bunch of us over in Germany. And we had heard pretty much instantly, within a matter of hours, I would imagine, that Shawn had been jumped. And I joke all the time about, like, I was saying 125 people or something. It was honestly, he was jumped by like 15 people or 18. It was some crazy number like that. And I remember thinking, it was well known that Shawn was not a fighter, wasn't a tough guy. And I thought, wait, what were these, like kids or something? Like, they jumped him because it just didn't make sense. And I knew that as soon as we got home, we'd be hearing, all of our friends would be calling and giving us the whole story. And Bulldog, British Bulldog, Davey Smith had called me. I think the morning after I'd gotten home, and filled me in what was going on, that he was there drunk and probably pilled up, allegedly. I know in these public things we have to say things like that.
It's a great word, allegedly, isn't it? Absolves many sins, the word allegedly.
Allegedly. I heard allegedly. So that he was being pretty obnoxious. And with, I guess, this one particular woman in the Rochester bar, and turns out her husband was a Marine, pretty tough guy. And I guess from what Davey told me, the Marine was pretty cool about it. Like, he went up to him and said, like, hey, that's my wife, can you do something with your friend? And so Davey decided to get him out of there. It was him, X-Pac, and Shawn. And as they're driving away from the bar, of course, they drive right past the front of the bar, and this Marine and his wife are out, and Shawn rolls the window down and starts, getting pretty loud, at which point the Marine has his way with him. And there were a bunch of Marines' friends there, I'm guessing Marines as well, and David jumped out of the car, and they all jumped on him, and he hit scratches and bruises all over him. And we all know what Davey Boy looked like. I would imagine that you see this big, thick muscle guy coming around. Yeah, that's where I'm going to put my firepower. So I'm expecting to get to, right after that. Well, in that phone call, Davey Boyd also told me that Shawn had been, the whole time we were gone, telling everybody in the dressing room he was going to embarrass me on the pay-per-view. And at this point, I thought Shawn and I were still pretty close, from the 1990 run. And I said, why? What's he talking about? And I said back to Davey, because Davey was one of those guys that like to really stir the pot. Like, say, if he said something to you, he's going to come right back and say, hey, James said whatever. Just sit back and watch the fireworks. And I knew that, so I just told Davey, knowing that Davey would get it back. I said, I'd love to see him try. I'll stretch his ass on that pay-per-view. And the very next morning, I get a phone call from J.J. Dillon saying, Shane, Vince doesn't, it was going to be me, Vince, and Shawn going in Tuesday to work on this. And Vince had already told us it was going to be a repeat of the Ultimate Warrior Rick Rude. I beat him for the Intercontinental belt at WrestleMania the next time. Chin Music beat me for the world title. And I was fine with that. Okay, it's great. I mean, I've always been a fan of Shawn's in-ring work, and was really looking forward to getting the chance to work with him. And so JJ makes this phone call, and he said, Vince doesn't need you in Tuesday anymore. You and Shawn in early anymore. Shawn's had a relapse of his concussion. I remember I've had medical school training, so how to get hit in the head again? Like, first of all, if you've had a serious concussion, you should take real careful protocol to make sure you don't get hit again. Could be a blood clot that breaks loose, whatever. And if it's a bleed, it could break that bleed open and be catastrophic. So I asked him, I said, well, how did he get hit in the head again? And he said, well, he didn't get hit in the head again. He just had a relapse. Okay, so I told Davey this last night. Davey relayed it. Shawn has ixnayed the match. So it didn't take me, fine, I can get 4 more days at home. So I flew in the night before, late. Me and Jim Cornette were on the last flight. midnight, I think we got in. Went to the hotel. I was roomed with Dustin Rhodes, and Dustin had left a note on the bed. We're all down in the bar waiting for you. So I threw my stuff out, and went downstairs. When I walked into the bar was jam-packed with people. You can imagine, like, a place like Winnipeg, Regina, I think it was. And I walk in and I see two hands going like this over top of the crowd. So I look, and it's Razor. And, at this point, Razor and I were sort of like this. So I thought, that's strange. But the one thing about Razor, the old saying, loose lips sink ships, like when he's drinking, boy, he can't help it or couldn't. And so I went straight to him. He had a chair waiting for me. Okay, sit down in the executioner's chair. And he said, really, really drunk. And he said, hey, you didn't hear it from me. First of all, I said, congratulations. I said, for what? Now, I hadn't said anything to anybody. Typically in an angle, if you and I are angled going into a pay-per-view like that, whatever we know, we're not telling all of our friends because we don't want it to leak out. And I said, congratulations for what? He said, well, you didn't hear it from me, but you're getting the belt tomorrow. I went, how am I getting the belt if Sean's not wrestling? It's strange, right? So I'm just figuring, at this point, he's drunk and just missed talking. So we get to the building the next day, and I remember we had heard, within 4, 5, 6 days prior to this is when this 375 people beat Sean on it. And I hadn't seen Sean, so I'm expecting to see him like Davey Boy, scratched and bruised up. And I pull in the parking lot, he pulls right next to me. So I look over, he looks fresh as a daisy. And he gets me out of the car, and I look at him going, like, in my brain, I'm thinking, like, it's like he bruised up under there or something, like, what, I hit him all body shots. So we're walking in, and I said something to him, and I heard you had a tough time the other night. Oh, yeah. Now we walk in, and the dressing room is to the left, and the makeup room is to the right. So we get there, and as I'm walking in, I said something like, man, there's I'm asking him about it, and he's like, just sort of like not really giving me answers, but just sort of, that kind of thing. I go to the dressing room, he goes in the makeup. About a half hour later, I go to catering. I'm heading to catering to get a coffee, and he comes out of the makeup room. He's got the contact in. So I said something like, man, those makeup girls must be tough on you. Oh, yeah.
He had a relapse of his bruises.
Yeah. He beat the hell from these makeup girls. And while I'm down getting my coffee, I get a message that Vince needs to talk to me. So I walk down to Vince. In Canada, every hockey arena has a local team, right? Like Montreal would be the pros. In the smaller towns like that, they're like semi-pro. Hockey is huge in Canada.
They're like AA or something.
Yes, yeah. And so they, he's all the way down at the end of the hall, and I go up and knock on the door. Tells me to come in. I open the door, and it's pitch black. I don't know if you've been in the locker room, like when the lights are turned off. There's always like one light someplace in the locker room just to keep like some light in there. And Vince has his table sitting right under that light. So it's very much like an old film noir, the shadows and everything. And so I come and I sit down, we're face to face like this. And he starts putting me over for my promo style and, just all the hate you get. And they're very animated and talking. And he said to me something along the lines of, about how it's never me. We here in the World Wrestling Federation believe the fans should always go home happy. And I went, okay. I said, well, that's where I would disagree with the WWE then, or WWF. He went, really? Why? And so we started having this discussion on philosophy and ring philosophy. And I said, first of all, my first territory, UWF, was heavy on heels, right? The heels were always running roughshod and drew a lot of money. Great promotion. As a heel that had just come from the ECW, that had sent fans home pissed off quite a few times, guaranteed the next show there were more because they wanted to see Taz. Fans are telling me now stuff like, man, I used to hate your guts. I want Taz to dump you on your head and break your neck. And I'm like, Jesus. So, and he goes, well, it's different. And he said his exact words to me, well, things are different here in the WWF. And I said to him, what, like gravity falls up? And he laughed it off. And so he gets now into the thing and he said, he's like, we're talking just general philosophy. And he's talking about, respecting me and that kind of thing. I said, Vince, let me stop you there. I said, understand where I come from in the business, how Dominic trained me, how I learned under Watts and Dusty. If you want me to do something, I might say to you, Vince, that won't work, and here's why. And I'll give you my philosophy. But if you say, I'm sorry, Shane, that's the way I want it. okay, I'm going to give it the way you want it because you signed my check. That was my exact words. I said, you signed my check, so I'm going to give you what you want. And he, well, I appreciate that. And he said, no, so tonight what we're going to do is, you go out that ring and you cut one of those scathing promos and get that heat. Okay. And I'm thinking, in the robe and everything. And I'm still in my mind wondering, how am I getting this belt if Shawn's not wrestling? So he said, and then at that point, Shawn's going to come down in his street clothes and he's going to forfeit the title. And my exact, we can cuss on here, right?
Of course you can.
Okay, so I said, oh my fucking God, Vince, don't do that. Please don't do that. And he went, why? I said, my whole life growing up, I've heard Bruno and every other champion say, you'd have to pry this belt from my cold, dead hands, or I get a little bump on my head and I'll just hand it to you. I said, I'm sure he can still super kick safely. Have him chin music me and beat me. We'll do this when he's back. He goes, well, no, we're committed to this and blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, you grab that belt and you covet it to your chest like it's the most covetous thing you've ever held in your life. And he goes, then at that point, I'm looking at his face. I'm thinking, what the hell's he doing with his arm? So I look to his shoulder, down to his elbow, and I keep going. I look, and over here, sitting in a locker, the big wooden lockers, is Razor Ramon, who's been sitting and listening to this whole conversation. I had no idea he's there because it's pitch black. And I look back at Vince and I said, what kind of fucking game are you playing here, Vince? He goes, like laughed it off. We'll do any finish you want. The finish we did in the ring was the finish I came up with. On the 2 count, the Dean slides his leg under the bottom rope, which breaks the count, or should. And because I said, otherwise my heat's dead. Whatever heat you've gotten on me and I'm building, you just flush down the toilet. It's great. We'll do that. Now, if you go back and watch it, I'm sure you have seen that clip. At the exact point, the ring general's leg goes, slides under the bottom rope, and the announcers make no mention of it. So, again, point taken. Learn, Vince. You won't get me a second time on that kind of thing. And it was just like that kind of bizarro world. And I said to him during our conversation, and you don't think the fans are savvy enough or smart enough to figure out this is a babyface to babyface belt switch. And the fans don't want to see, they want to see a logical storyline that progresses and carries out. Not just this, well, we don't want to put them on any heels because we're the WWE and gravity falls up here. You've got to say, I guarantee you'd have sent those fans home pissed off that night, especially as he's hurt from this beating. If the Dean would have gotten on him and really heated up and sent the Clique out and ran me off, Shawn and I, the next time in that building, would have packed that building. And, but that was not to be. Again, the WWE, WWF, this, and I think what we're seeing now, not been a fan of their product. Can't be a fan of the product because it makes no logic to me. So, and I think the vestiges of it started back then.
At least we got that song, Tell Me a Lie, when Shawn Michaels was coming back for 2 months. And then they did the kick thing. Sorry for singing at you there, Shane. And
that's like the equivalent of the Dean's hands on the blackboard, right?
Hey, I've got a lovely singing voice, I'll have you know.
I sound great in the shower.
I want to ask you, I want to pick on something you said about 8-10 minutes ago in that, is that the original plan between you and Shawn, how far was that going to go, the feud? I mean, I know back in probably the mid-90s still that they planned their feuds many months in advance. But so as far as you knew, this is going to be the first confrontation really between you and Shawn in Winnipeg. How far was it going to go? Was it going to make it to WrestleMania, do you think, or how far?
That was as far as I had heard. But typically at that time, that would have progressed on beyond that. If you remember, like Rude and the Warrior being the template. I know that Vince had a lot planned for that because at Valparaiso, Indiana, I had a TV taping around that time. I forget if it was before. I think it was before it, but not long before it. This is when Bill Watts was still there. They had Shawn and I go out and work the first dark match, which is where they get the cameras and the sound and lights and everything ready. Vince clearly wanted to see what we could do together. And we had circled around a couple times. 17,000 people sold out. We went to lock up, and as I reach out for the lockup, he takes a flat back bump and he's laying right in front of me. Now, I know Bill Watts right now, his head is exploding back there. wondering why I don't drop down and sugar his ass or take my way with him. And so I looked down and I said, unless you want your ass stretched, you best get back to your feet. And he rolled away and he's covering his mouth going, take it easy, Dean, calm down, Dean. The rest of the match was me calling the match as the heel. When I would say, backdrop, he would say, no, drop kick. Backdrop, damn it. And it was like fighting that whole way. We came back. It was the first time I'd ever spoken back to Bill Watts. We came back and Bill looked at me and he went, and I put my hand up and said, don't say a fucking thing. I said, talk to your fucking golden boy. And I don't know what happened beyond that between him and Bill, but probably nothing. But the Bill that I'd worked for a few years before would have been a little less than happy, in the UWF over that. And to be fair, Vince McMahon should have been pissed off about that. It's his product in front of 17,000 people, even though it's not being televised. There's 17,000 people who go out and go, hey, Dean Douglas and Shawn Michaels did this weird thing, and the match was real choppy as a result. So Vince, again, the eternal question, was this some kind of plan by Vince? Did it just sort of happen and he let it? Or was he completely aloof? Who knows? It's irrelevant to me. The product sucked and was harmed by the fact that this was going on.
I'm glad you mentioned Bill Watts coming in 1995. 3 fabulous weeks of Bill Watts in the WWF, basically. I've heard a story with Kevin Nash saying this, is that basically he screwed Bill Watts on purpose in a match with Yokozuna in a cage match. Do you know what I'm getting at this, or? No,
I remember there being quite a lot of bitching in the dressing room because, we had literally flipped the universe upside down. I remember there was, it was in Michigan somewhere, and Bill had called a bunch of us into the room. I know Sean, it was Scott, Kevin, I think maybe Hunter, and it was, if it wasn't all the Clique, it was a bunch of them. But then more, Bob Backlund was there. I was there. There were like 10, 12 of us in the room. And Sean got there late. And, Bill's up at the whiteboard and we're all sitting there listening. And Sean walks in late and Bill looks at him pretty perturbed, right? And he grabs a chair and walks up to the front and sits the chair backwards and sits down on the chair and he's chewing his gum like that, chewing his gum. And Bill's started around, looks at him, and goes back to the whiteboard. 2 or 3 times, he finally puts the marker down. He walks up to Sean and goes, pulls the gum out and puts it on the back of the chair and goes right back. And I thought, that's classic Bill Watts, right? That's what you're going to get with Bill. But that night, we left all the heels laying, or all the faces laying. I picked Sean up and dropped him on the metal stairs. I'm trying to think. There was a bunch of people in there, but we left all the faces laying. A woman attacked me from the audience after I left Sean laying. And, heat. You feel the heat from this. Bill wanted the heels to have heat. Baby faces chasing the heat and ultimately overcoming the heat. It's 12 tests of Hercules, right? The classic, from the classical times, storylines, universal storylines. And I think that day was, there were probably, again, roots or a bit earlier. But that day, I remember Vince losing his mind. Where all my faces are left laying. You mean they're human beings and got screwed by a whole bunch of nasty heels? Yeah, good idea. And Bill was gone not long after that.
I also wrote here, and I can't remember the context, but I've just written, Bill Watts punching you in WCW. What happened?
Yes.
What happened?
Yeah, we were in Milwaukee for the Clash of Champions. Steamboat and I were wrestling, Brian and Steve, and by this time the angle was pretty well progressed. I believe we were the main event, and we get there earlier in the day. Now, this is when WCW has the rule, no blading. You'll get fired. And Bill, we get there, and Bill takes me away. Let's take a walk. And walking. We just keep walking and walking and walking away from the dressing room, away from Steamboat. We're walking down these stairs into this band. We're down by these huge boilers in the basement. My first thought was is he going to bring me down there and shoot me or something? What did I do wrong? We're in the bowels of the building, and we get all the way down there. And he said, "I've got a very serious question to ask you. Can you get color without getting caught?" Now, this is a Clash of Champions. This is an 8-camera shoot. And I went, oh, I don't know, man. I said, will I get fired? Said, hell yeah, we'll all get fired. I don't know, Bill. I said, that's, I don't know where I could go unless I climb under the ring or something. And he said, no, but I want you to think about it. So I went to Jackie Crockett, who was the handheld guy. Jackie was phenomenal. I mean, he could, like a clock, like a nuclear clock, he was right on time. So I went to him and I said, hey, can you, I asked Bill first. I said, can I smarten anybody up? He goes, hell no, you all get fired. I said, if I don't smarten up Steamboat and he thinks I'm Hardway, he's liable to jump in and start beating people's asses. And he goes, okay, well then Ricky. And I said, can I smarten up Jackie? And again, he refused. I said, if I don't, he'll catch me. And then we'll both be on the line. He said, those two, nobody else. So I went, told Steamer. He was fine with it. Went and told Jackie, and Jackie said, hell no, it's my job. And I said, Jackie, can you give me anything? He said, I thought about it for a few minutes, and he came back and said, I'll give you to the count of 1,003. So now we're doing the match. I had on my finger and wearing white tights, and the damn blade had worked its way through the Band-Aid and cut my finger, so I'm bleeding. So if you watch closely, every time the referee walks by me, I'll rub my hand on him or on my boot. I'm trying on the rope. I don't want the blood to be seen. So we finally go to the 4-way, hot finish, referee putting Steamboat out. I do the roll up on Steve into the cover. Brian jumps off the top with the belt and hits me. I take the bump to the floor. And as I'm going through the ropes, in my head, I'm going 1,001, 1,002, 1,000. And at 1,003, here came Jackie around the corner. Perfect, right? So good heat, got great heat on the blondes. We go back to the dressing room. This is one of these buildings that has a stage area. And on both sides of the stage, there's these, always these stairways that go up, I don't know, 6, 7 floors. And there's 2 little tiny dressing rooms on each floor. So we're all the way up on the top, and we're in this, I think it was me, Zank, Brad Armstrong, and Ricky. Well, I'm there, I've wiped my face off, and I'm taking my boots off. We're ready to get showered and leave. We were done as far as we knew. So Bill comes in. I hear him coming down the hall. Son of a bitch, where's that Shane Douglas? That's fucking great. He comes around the corner, and he goes, let me take a look at that. So he's standing right here, and he's looking at my head, and I'm taking my boots off, and all of a sudden, boom! Knocks me back in the chair. And I come up out of the chair with my fists up going at him. Steamboat jumps in between us. He goes, what the fuck was that for? He goes, you guys have a promo at the end of the show. We had never told us. And Ricky looks at him and he goes, and he couldn't get it again? And just it's simple, right? They wanted to wrap my head and everything. I was pissed. And didn't say anything. We get in the car afterwards, and we're done, showered up, and we're leaving. So we get in the car. Ricky always drove at night. So I get in the passenger seat, and I pull the door shut, and Ricky pulls his door shut, and he leans into me like that. So I put my hands on. I said, what, are you going to hit me now? And he looked at me and he said, that son of a bitch ever does that again, you fall down and say you can't feel your legs. I'm sitting in the car and I went, that's why he's the smart veteran and I'm the dumb kid. Right? And later found out from Rick Root in ECW that Bill walked through the dressing room showing everybody the blood on his hand and said, I just punched that motherfucker in the face and he didn't do a damn thing. I'd have kneecapped him if I knew that. He'd have been in a wheelchair right after that. But yeah, looking back, and you've probably heard me say this many times in interviews, I don't advocate the way that Bill managed, coached his team, so to speak. But I had coaches in sports younger that were in that vein, yell at you and, throw, smack you on the head and stuff, trying to bring more out of you. And that's what Bill was doing. I think he took it way too far. And I don't advocate that stuff, but I do find it interesting. You'd have to look high and low to find somebody that worked in either Mid-South or later the UWF and went on someplace else that weren't great at their craft. Everybody that went through, even the gimmicks like Junkyard Dog and the Hacksaw, never dropped the ball. And I think it goes back to that Bill Watts acumen, that Bill Watts coaching style, that it was pretty much learn it or else. And I've told the stories about seeing guys get their teeth knocked out and stuff, from Slater. As a young kid, that's pretty impressionable. You're seeing this kind of thing and thinking, holy hell, if I screw up and get my teeth knocked out, it's, it was pretty tense. It was always tense there. But I look back at heard interviews. How many times I say Bill Watts taught me this. I learned this from Bill Watts, an awful lot of times.
Absolutely. Just going on that before, I've heard that multiple times where somebody has. I mean, I've heard it from Bill where he's basically sucker punched someone for some reason. I'm not to be Kevin Nash's biographer, but I know he did it to him. I didn't warn him he was going to do it. But there's some people also out there who really, really enjoyed getting a Hardway blood going, maybe like Harley Race, who just had that knack for punching downwards and just cutting, and just doing it. Who was the best at, or in fact, who insisted on only bleeding Hardway? Do you know, if anyone?
Oh, I was never in the ring with anybody that way. There was one time with Candido and XPW. We're wrestling each other in XPW, and I had said I was the booker, so I said to him, "Look, I'm not sure if the time's going to present itself, but if it does, can you Hardway me?" Well, yeah, no problem. So when you Hardway, what you want to do is with your knuckle right along the brow ridge, the eyebrow bone right here is pretty much a razor blade inside. It's split really easily. And so we get into the match and getting good heat built, and I said to him, "Get it." So he comes down and he does that kind of a punch. I said, "No, Hardway." So he comes in and he keeps doing it, and he comes like sort of downward, but like full fist. And I said, "No, it's knuckle." And he keeps doing it. So he's like literally in the ring, like punching me, which what that does is that keeps it from splitting because now your face starts to puff. And we come back and I walked up and I said, "Chris, what the hell?" I walked over in the dressing room like, and he started bleeding. Went, so I've never seen anybody that just insisted on that. But to be fair, by the time I was starting to get up that card a little bit, Harley and those guys were still around, but they were sort of like he's now doing like the king gimmick in WWF or whatever, like sort of on the downside of his career. And I certainly wasn't anywhere near the ring with those guys. So I'd never, that would be something like if you and I were working, we would talk.
I'll move on and do the old potpourri of questions. I've wanted to ask you this for ages, and I never got to ask Don Morocco it either. You were teaming with Donnie in, this is Eastern Championship Wrestling, and you were wrestling Tito Santana and Stan Hansen. And the end of the match just completely falls apart, almost literally, because the ring falls apart, like the top rope collapses. Is that the... Just talk me through what goes through your head when something like that happens and the ring falls apart or just everything collapses around you. How do you sort of get through that? And specifically that match as well.
Yeah. Typically in a match like that, if one of the bottom ropes breaks, it's rare that they like fall completely off, but if it happens, and as long as the top rope is still taut, you can sort of get through it. You're not going to hit the ropes full blast or whatever. But when that happens and anything becomes apparent, if boards pop out, which later the rings become better. In older rings, it was quite often boards would pop out. That can really hurt somebody. If you take a bump on your back and the board's ready to break something, get knocked out because those boards are jostling this way, especially in a match with guys that were Morocco size and Hansen size. Tito and I were the little guys in that match. So you have to really assess. And of course, in that ring, I'm following those guys out of respect. And, these are guys I looked up to and grew up watching. So they would pretty much follow. But I remember at one point, Stan calls a clothesline. And I'd never been in the ring with him before. As I come off the ropes, I was a lot faster back in those days. I'm coming off the ropes. I look at Stan and he's going, he literally can't see me. And I'm going, oh my God, he's going to kill me, right? And phenomenal in the ring. But yeah, when that happens, it happened another time, much, much earlier in my career. We were in upstate New York. It was me and Dominic versus a guy named Dave Klebanski and Cactus Jack, Mick Foley. And Mick is hitting the ropes, and I'm, they're doing like the crossover. And I'm watching Mick, and Mick goes, hits ropes and all. He's there, and then poof, he's not there. It's like he disappeared in thin air. I'm like, what the hell? And then I hear, so like that, and I just instinctively jerked away from it. And I didn't know what happened. Went back and looked because Mick was hitting rope so hard that it was an actual rope. The ropes, the turnbuckle broke. the threads came out, and what whizzed by my head was the turnbuckle, the 12-inch turnbuckle flying. That hit me part of it, killed me. And Mick had luckily, we were kids, we didn't know what we were doing. Just instinctively, as the rope broke, he tensed, and that tightened his arm on the rope and allowed his body to pivot. Had he not, had he just been hitting Dominic always taught us arm over rope. Some people hit just back only. That would have broken. He'd have gone out and landed right on his head. When that happens, typically, obviously they're going to keep the show going on if they can. But if it's like in that kind of a case, it's pretty much done, right? I mean, the ring just I'd forgotten about that. The ring just going to hell. I do remember way early in my career in Lorain, Ohio, we got to a theater building, and I was supposed to wrestle in Samu that night, and the ring didn't show. No ring didn't show up at all. So we went out and wrestled on the stage with no ropes, no turnbuckles, nothing. The good old days of the independent wrestling.
But I've seen a photo a few years ago now. It was Nikolai Volkov versus Bobby Fulton, and I think the ring didn't show up that time either, so they just wrestled on the mats.
Yeah, it's make do. You got to make that money.
Absolutely. Next in our potpourri of questions, I'm going to ask you about the Shawn Michaels versus Marty Jannetty fight in the locker room. Were you actually present for that?
Yep. Me and Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, were both there. The build-up to this, because you have to put it in context, was Marty had always let Shawn take care of the business with Vince, right? You can fill in whatever the business is. The story that he was getting from Shawn was that when they split them up, they were both going to get big singles pushes, which made sense. I mean, both were good workers, both were, well known. And so the night they do this, I'm in the dressing room, I'm done for the night, getting ready to grab a shower, and I see him put him through the window, the barbershop window. Oh, great angle, good stuff. And Marty's selling his ass off. Well, Shawn does his thing, and walks off. So of course, to sell it, Marty's being tended to and all that. So Shawn gets back a lot quicker than Marty does. And when you walked into this dressing room, again, the wooden, open lockers. So I'm sitting at mine, and Perfect is right across from me. To the right was the bathroom, the toilets, and there was a whiteboard. And Brett would always draw, his infamous comics on the thing. And Shawn's bag was right below the whiteboard. So he comes walking in, goes over to his bag, and Kurt's right across from him, we're both doing our thing, and several minutes later, boom, like hard, somebody comes slamming through the door. It's Marty. Marty comes, the door's over here to my left. Marty looks at me, looks at Kurt, looks at Shawn, and goes, "You mother," and starts across the room. And as he's going, I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? He's across the room, and he gets 4 or 5 feet from him, and Shawn goes, and just falls down. Like there's that lamb that, like, when it gets scared, it just falls over.
It's a goat.
Yeah. Just yank. And he goes down and curls up in a ball, and Marty gets over there, and he's like looking, and so he puts his hand against the whiteboard and smudged the thing later. I saw the smudge, and he starts putting the boots to him. And I looked at Kurt, and I went, "Should we stop it? Like, I've never seen this. I don't know what's good. Are they ribbing or what's going on?" And Kurt looked at me like, and that was the end of it. And what the reason that happened was when Marty got back to the gorilla position, Vince said to him, "Marty, we'll be in touch in a couple months if we have something for you." And so he knew, like, boom, Shawn had gotten him, and it went after him pretty good. It's
sorry, you don't know that there, but we had a little break. Sorry, just like you'd say inside baseball. I can never help but make things look as unsmooth as possible. So, in the next of our potpourri of random questions, I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this, but you probably heard something. Criminy, the amount of times I've brought up Kevin Nash in this thing, but he refers to it as the Helter Skelter incident. Something happened where Tatanka ends up getting suspended in late 1995. Do you know the story about why?
No, I was gone at that time. I was, I forget exactly whenever I left, but it was,
I think you left in December 95, January 96, somewhere around there. This was sort of end of 95. He ends up getting suspended, but the incident, I think, actually happened late 94. I don't know if there was rumours afloating at that time.
Yeah, I didn't. These things that you're bringing up to me, I'm intrigued now. I got to go. I'm sort of interested because Kevin would always have those examples. The Attica. I knew what Attica was. You probably don't. But the Helter Skelter thing. Yeah, I'd be curious to find it out. At that time there was so much going on, and again, when you get to those, like I said earlier, you're focused on your stuff and trying to come up with stuff for your thing. You sort of wander through, and unless it happened like literally right in front of you, you really weren't paying attention to it. And you get back to the hotel afterwards, you hear the stories, right? Hey, did you hear this happened or that happened? I'm like, when did that happen? Where did that happen? I didn't see it. Because again, in a company that size, when you're at work, you're at work, and there's an awful lot of stuff going on. But I gotta ask about it because I'm sure something like that would be pretty prodigious.
Yeah. I'll tell you about afterwards what I've heard anyway. We'll move on then. Now I don't know this answer at all. Did you have issues with the Stu Hart 50th anniversary show? Because I believe at the time, I can't remember what year it was. It probably was mid-90s, but they were going to have WCW and WWF wrestlers on that card. You were booked to wrestle Chris Benoit that night. I don't think you ended up wrestling Chris because of inter-promotional tensions. Is that how you remember it?
Yes. Where was that, in Edmonton or
must have been Calgary, surely.
Calgary? Yes. Oh my gosh. It's funny because some of the things stand out so far. As I do recall, it had something to do, at least what I was told as I remember, something about, they didn't want, because this is at the time where they WWF didn't want their guys in the ring. WCW, Paul was fine with it because of course exposure for us, but there was something about that. But there was something more to that story too. I'm at the incident. If, by the way, see the shadow come over, because Danny the Dinosaur just came into the room. The Stu Hart Classic, and I was supposed to work with Benoit, and it didn't come off. Was that because Inter-promotional, or what was the reason for that?
I don't know what to say. Sure, I think it wasn't.
Yeah, he seems to remember the same. But as with all things, these things usually go back. And if you would, like on this kind of stuff, like just send it to Moose beforehand, because I want to be able to tell your listeners and viewers, what I know about it. And usually, when something like that comes up, if cobwebs are back there somewhere, there's always more to those stories.
Yeah. Well, do you remember why Chris Benoit? I mean, I think he did some tryout matches for the WWF in 1995, along with quite a few other people like Rhino and stuff around this time. Do you remember why Chris wasn't picked?
Size.
Simply that.
Yeah, size. Vince was, I just read this yesterday, a thing on my one of my feeds about Taz, and they had a few things wrong. They said that the Kurt Angle cross incident happened in Pittsburgh. It didn't happen in Philadelphia. And with Taz, they said that Hunter came in and worked with him and then got him shoved right down the list. As I recall, Taz had a pretty damn good cage match with Kurt Angle and then disappeared. And I remember calling him at that time and saying, like, man, after a great match like that, why are you commenting? I thought he got hurt or something. There's none. I said, Vince just came up to me and told me, I just don't buy your gimmick because of the size, right? And I said, that's funny because for 2 years plus, 3 of us, Bam Bigelow, Chris Candido, the franchise, did this from Taz. And I can honestly say exactly 0 times did anybody say, come on, he's only 5'9" or whatever, right? The people got off on it every time. But Vince, as we all know, it's funny now because the business has sort of just gone that way, right? At 253 pounds, I was a small guy in wrestling. I mean, small guy. You got Kevin Nash, 6'10", 6'11", Undertaker, 6'10", 6'11", and you got these monsters walking around that you literally feel, no matter how big, how pumped, how much muscle you packed on, you were still a little guy in wrestling. On the street, you're a monster, and you walk into this world and suddenly, shrink up, right? And let's face it, Benoit was obviously shorter, probably around 5'10", 5'9", like in that range. But boy, could he go in the ring, right? I mean, I'm not telling fans anything they don't know. He was the guy, much like Brad Armstrong earlier in my career. To me, when I would watch Brad Armstrong, I used to think, if wrestling were real, that's what it would look like. If pro wrestling was real, that's what it would look like. Chris, the same thing later. An Irish whip wasn't just, I grab James by his wrist and just give a little tug and you zip on over there and come on back. It looked like he was pulling a tow truck. Veins bulge out, the squat down, both hands, the push by. How kids out there watching wonder how to do an Irish whip properly, watch Chris Benoit. I can learn too. He was a phenomenal in-ring performer because he had to make up for those things, much like earlier with Brian Pillman, always being the smaller guy, then excelling into the NFL and everything because he'd gotten told that so many times. He thought, I'm going to show you guys. And Benoit, the same thing. Chris knew that he had to be twice as good as everybody just to get a look. And man, the way that progressed into the ring was stunning.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Chris Candido as well. I mean, I believe he was one of the victims of the heightest Vince McMahon regime at the time. I mean, didn't they try and turn him into Mighty Mouse at one point, maybe? Yeah.
It's all these corny things you hear. The fact that I always, things that are going on in politics and us or business, and we're hearing crazy stuff today. And I'll say to people, there was somebody sitting in an office somewhere that one day went, hey, I got an idea. And I'd love to be a fly on that wall to see like what the faces on everybody else around the table did. And, it's like with Vince, it's well known all the stories of Vince, we think, yes, Vince, we think you're great. Everything you say is correct. That somebody came up with an idea to do a Mighty Mouse type gimmick. And it was bad enough the Body Adonis stuff and everything else. Again, this was Vince's era where, the goon and the evil plumber and the evil college professor and all these like just real stupid caricature things that I had grown up watching wrestling. And it didn't matter to me what somebody had been prior. When I first saw Harley Race wrestle, he looked like a truck driver. I didn't think of him as a truck driver. I thought, my God, he's amazing in the ring. Billy Graham. Not the greatest in-the-ring worker, but boy, look at that body in the mid-1970s and the gift of gab and the blonde hair. And, just take me and put me on the hook and you got me. And suddenly we went into this really bad period of gobbledygookers and goons and just evil deans and all that. It's just cornball.
What's so funny about that is, obviously the WWF wasn't doing very well in 1995, so where they had all these occupational characters, where it made it seem like they were earning so little that they had to have two jobs. So you had to have the wrestling, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a fan's perspective, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at this and going, well, so like, why is the plumber not out fixing a drain somewhere? Or the dean, why isn't he lecturing in the college somewhere? It really did. And I know I've told this story before, so stop me. And if I've said it to you guys here, when they came up with the dean character, they hadn't really yet told me the name or what they were sort of this nebulous type of idea. And I went into a boardroom. Vince was not there. It was the writers. And they all had my actual resume. Their teacher and this and that. And they're looking at the resume and they had me take my shirt off and had me slowly turn. So I'm pirouetting at the front of this table and they're all going, well, they're ready to give you the secrets of the universe. This is the meaning of life. And they see this teacher gimmick right now. He's the evil teacher. And they starts progressing and it becomes, no, he's the principal. No, he's this. And it ramps up and finally somebody says he's a dean. And when they came up with that, now, when I left that room, it was an odd enough experience, sort of surreal, that when I went to Vince, my deal with Vince was that whatever we did was kept legitimate. So if I was going to be a professor, I'm envisioning somebody in a black gown, like with the leaflet around the neck, what do they call that? Baccalaureate. And, this type of a deal. So that the grades were meant to be A, B, C, D, F. This guy was supposed to be a strict disciplinarian, which I had been chairman of the discipline committee when I taught. Supposed to be these things, and this is where they come up with the idea for the paddle. Now, you start to get into this, and you go like, okay, like bondage type, like gay stuff. Like it's sort of weird. Like only paddling guys with a board, and it just sort of like took this off ramp. to where the character as conceived verbally between me and Vince, I think would have worked, and I could have certainly carried that off. But then it sort of took this off ramp to now the grades were TT for terrible twosome and cornbully stuff like that. That it just went from this idea in my head that was crystallized to this sort of boring guy, speaking in a monotone voice. And by the way, for the fans out there, Vince told me one time with the voice, I said, well, I'm bored out of my skull doing this. I said, please let me do some inflection and stuff. And that's when I did the actual as the franchise, but giving the same grade, same verbiage. And where he pulled me aside and said he appreciated my way, but the reason he had me doing that was in 8th grade. This was Vince's story. In 8th grade, he had a teacher that talked like that, and it drove him crazy. I went, okay, a couple differences. In 8th grade, you couldn't just get up and walk out. You were a captive there. Today, I'm one of them. People do this. Commercial comes, I don't watch commercial. Flipping, and come back. I said, if fans see this guy talking like that, as soon as they see him standing, they're going, oh, I'll be back. He's going to bore me out of my socks and or out of my boots. But that was Vince's reason. 8th grade teacher drove him crazy.
Oh, goodness me, Vince. What can you say?
God love him.
God love him.
And now with that mustache.
Yeah, pervert mustache, dyed brown hair. Madman. He's an absolute madman. We're going to move on, and I hate to say this is the low-hanging fruit section, as we called it last time. But I'm going to ask a question about Ric Flair, but it's not going to be what he was. I want to make mention here now that Dick Flair, I think you referred to him as one time. the last video that you did on him for this channel, I just had a look. 116,000 people watched it.
Yeah.
So that was quite.
Is that good, bad?
What, 6 figures? I'd for one clip, I'd say that's pretty darn good. Ric Flair responded, and just typical Ric Flair. You know what he's going to say. He obviously didn't watch your video. He watched the first 4 seconds and then made up his mind as what is that. Anyway, his video did a lot worse. But I'm not going to ask about that. I'm going to ask you about when you first came up with the idea to do the inter-promotional Shane Douglas, Ric Flair, ECW versus WCW matches. How, from conception to when it was almost a reality, how many weeks or months was there?
Yeah, it came that close. It was probably months. It was probably wishful thinking in my head. But again, my differences with him aside, I've always been a mark for his work, right? He's a great in-ring performer, or was. And watching the reason the franchise character started doing that was, Paul had said, I had that first 5-minute promo at the first time of the franchise, 5-minute promo. I hadn't fleshed the character out, didn't really know what the character was going to be. And all day long, I keep asking him, what do you want me to say? What do you say? Well, I'll get with him. And I'm thinking, literally, my music is playing in the ring. I've never done a 5-minute promo. That's a long promo, and for anybody. And my music's playing. I went, Paul, what do you want me to say? He went, whatever you want. And it threw me for about a second. And I thought, I got this. So being in Philadelphia, I was well aware because it was a mark for Rick's work. Charlotte, of course, he was a god, right? Could walk on water in Charlotte. But Chicago and Philadelphia weren't far behind. Those 2 towns, like, he was right there, really, really idolized. And so I thought, let's say something about it. If Paul wanted me to be the new 60-minute man and the updated version of him, at one point, Paul had floated the idea of me doing his woo and his chop. So you out of your fucking mind? I'm out here burying the guy and then I'm going to copy him. So, I went out, and part of my shtick then was to bury Flair, thinking burying Flair in Philadelphia is going to get heat on me. And instead, the next time I come, if people hold up signs, Flair is dead, franchise new 60-minute man, stuff like that, almost turning me face. Like, no, not what I'm looking for, right? Now, how that translated when I told Flair that story. Flair tried to say I tried to put all the heat on Paul, and then I told him that it was all made up and that I was not trying to, like, dude, that is not what I said. I looked him in the eye and said, here's why I said these things. And so when this starts to happen, and after several months of doing these promos, and it was clear that he was not coming. Arn had come in for a show. Paul would always threaten WCW lawsuits that we'd get. That's how we got Pillman. That's how we got Sherry originally. That's how we got Arn, Bobby.
Mick as well. I mean, Mick came around that time, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah. And Arn had come in, and when he walked into the building, you know, Arn and I have always gotten along great. By the way, heartbreaks. Arn, so sorry for your brother with Brock's passing. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. But he, you know, Double Ace is such a good guy and a phenomenal wrestler and teacher. He had come and it was almost like he had something like to tell. And he grabbed, you know, looked at me and waved me over, went to get the ball, and huddled us into a room and closed the door. And being like, what's going on? And he started talking to Paul first. And I'm half listening, half paying attention. I'm getting, you know, thinking about my match that night. And he said, Nate wants to know if he can trust Shane in the ring. And that's what caught my attention. And I looked and I said, you know, like, why do you ask? And he said, well, this is when he's having his trouble with Bischoff and coming up with the contract, and was floating the idea of us bringing him in. And I don't know, he and Paul talked privately also. I don't know, wasn't privy to the conversation as to all what was Rick sending through this message. But it was like $100,000 or $150,000, some number that we couldn't afford to pay. And so right there on the cuff, I came up with the idea. I said, well, why don't we do a series of 3 matches? And to show Rick that I'll do business, first match will be in Charlotte. 55 minutes, I'll do the favor for him. Second match in Pittsburgh, same thing, 6 minutes, we'll slide me over. Now it's 1-1. Now we have to have a rubber match, Philadelphia. And I told Paul, we'll run the Spectrum. This will be our first pay-per-view. And give him, I think, like at that time I said, give him 10% of the gate and the buy, whatever that would have been. And that was pretty much where the conversation was left. And lickety split, like that week or within the next week or two, we hear that he'd re-signed with WCW. And Paul wanted me to continue hitting Flair in these promos. And I said, look, Paul, it's almost pathetic now. We know he's not coming. Prior to that, there was still maybe a questionable chance. But after that, we knew he wasn't coming. It was sort of looking pathetic, like the old Vince McMahon thing that I agree with to a tiny degree. Don't talk about the other companies because you're giving them time, right? Now, ECW was different because we were the small guy trying to make our bones. But it was clear that he wasn't coming. And so it sort of looks like, you know, like me going out and say shooting on Bruno. He's retired. Like, why, you know, it's going to get you some heat, and then it's going to be like, okay, why? And Paul wanted me to keep doing that. And for a while after I did do that, like throw him in here and there, like the Dick promo. But it really dissipated after that. I started segueing the character to other places, focus more on our people than Ric Flair. But it came close. I don't know how close from the time that Arn left that building, if maybe this was just, you know, Flair yanking our chain and trying to make WCW nervous. But in some short period after, the idea was gone.
Yeah, as you said, he re-signed with WCW. In my mind, it was always a cross-promotion with ECW and WCW, but that wasn't the case. ECW was actually going to bring Flair in for a short time.
Yes, yeah, for the 3 shots. And then, you know, my hope was, I guess somewhere in the back of my head was, once we get, you know, I was always calling in my promos, and because I believed it, once we got to pay-per-view, that was sort of the nirvana. Right, that was us getting to the promised land, and you know, at that point we would grow much bigger and faster. I still think then, I still think now, like I thought then, that whether it was in WCW later or in ECW then, the fans all knew that Shane Douglas and Flair really had legitimate heat, and if Flair had come in and done business, that we could have at that time helped WCW turn things around, because he could still go in the ring at that time. I was pretty much at the top of my game at that time, and because of the legitimacy of it. And that's pretty much what Bischoff had said. I want to be the one that gets to bring this to TV. We tried in ECW and failed. Tried it. Bischoff tried. What surprises me is that Bischoff wasn't keen enough to see as soon as he started the politicking, which was literally the first day I was in there with him. that he didn't know what Flair was up to. That, you know, he was in some way sloughing off this angle that was, in my mind, meant to help start turning the corner. And he started burying from the very beginning.
We will move on. I'm going to call it potpourri every single time now. But there's potpourri of questions. I've got a couple from fans. I'm sorry I don't have the names. I've somehow erased the names. But this chap says, love Shane Douglas in the old ECW. Triple Threat was one of the three badass factions in ECW. I grew up seeing the later version with Chris Candido and Bam Bam Bigelow. I never saw the original version. Which version of the Triple Threat did you prefer?
The later one. And let me qualify that. The way I came up with the idea was every promotion I'd ever watched had that heel stable that ran Russia, House of Humperdinck, the Fabulous Freebirds, the Four Horsemen, the Valiant Brothers. There was always some heel faction that was just having its way with the dressing room. And I looked around, we didn't have that. And so I thought, well, who better to do it than me, right? And if somebody's going to do it, let it be me. And I came up with the idea of three because four, it now takes three to do what four used to do. And kicked around a couple ideas and almost instantly came up with Triple Threat. And the original incarnation, of course, was Benoit and Dean Malenko, big fans of both their work. And it was three different, you know, very different creatures. It wasn't three vanilla. It was all the flavors. You know, Dean was the mechanic. Chris was that explosive, oh my God, incredible in-ring performer. And the franchise was the big mouth. It worked. But there's only, to my knowledge, there's only three pictures of us together as the Triple Threat. The first one was of us coming out of a television station in Florida in the parking lot, and some fan there took a picture. And there's two more. There's only those three. So if anybody else has more out there, I'd love to see them. They left to go to WCW in within a matter of months. It was very, very short. And Paul really didn't get a chance to put much into it. The interim version was me, Candido, again, big fan of Candido's work. And then I thought we need a big guy, right? You know, a guy can't have me as the big guy because, you know, I wasn't a big guy.
The Terry Gordy role, basically.
Yes, the big badass, right? And there's Brian Lee. And so always loved Brian. You know, he just come off the fake Undertaker run. And to this day, I've never found out what happened. And I think I've only seen Brian like once or twice since. He just didn't show up to work one time. He's gone. And disappeared, and like we were gonna put on milk cartons, you know, and he disappeared. And within a week or two or three, Bam Bam walked in. Ding, idea, you know, light bulb over my head, and we put him in there. That later version, because it had the time into it, right? Paul was really able to push it, and initially had us carrying all four belts, you know. So there's this heel faction with Franny standing right there, it wasn't tough on the eyes, with all the gold. The TV belt, the world title, the tag belts. And he kept it there for a couple months, and it really got us over. But the three of us worked so seamlessly together. I'm sure Chris and Dean and I would have as well, and Brian and Dean and I would have as well. But Bammer was just a very professional wrestler, if that makes sense, in the sense that he wasn't coming and go, come on, I was at WrestleMania. I can't have Spike Dudley beat me, you know, and by him coming in and doing that, it elevated him and elevated everybody he worked with. And, the three of us really got along incredibly well. And that makes it a lot easier in carrying off the types of things that we had to do. We knew that we could trust each other. Then we got to a point where the physical language between us. I knew when Chris turned a certain way what he was doing. I knew when Bam Bam did this, what he was doing. It was just like a language between us that sort of developed. And it became seamless. So those guys paid most time put into it, but also, two damn good workers in Chris Candido and Bam Bam.
While you were talking then, I was thinking of a story that Dutch Mantel, my podcast cohort, Dutch Mantel, told me about Bam Bam Bigelow. He said in 1995, Bam Bam was threatened with 30 days suspension because he tested positive for weed. Basically, they did the test, and then he thought he'd have a chong away, and then they did another test in Madison Square Garden, wherever they were the next day. He got busted. He was going to be sent home for 30 days, and so was the guy he was working with. And Bam Bam said, listen, just keep me on the road. Don't let this guy get punished as well. And just don't pay me.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. So stories like that, it makes me think, man, Bam's a true brother. Someone's really got your back.
Yeah. Well, look at how we did the belt change, right? Paul had the Pittsburgh pay-per-view coming up. And I'd had the belt 30 days before, Bam Bam, of all people, comes to that curtain with Rude and beats me in 30 seconds, right? And hot knife through butter. And it was completely believable because he had this damn good match with a guy that wasn't even a wrestler on WrestleMania. Bammer had really proven his bones in that match and was worldwide known. So going into Pittsburgh, coming off the way he beat me, the only thing that made sense to me was to use the Flair Vader match 1990 as the template. No matter what I do to this monolith, I can't hurt him. And he kept squashing me and squashing me and squashing me. And I mean, the pop that you see at the end of the match in the Pittsburgh pay-per-view, the Golden Dome pay-per-view, that was all Bam Bam. I was just along for the ride because he carried that match. Most of that match is him doing stuff to me, and the building was excruciatingly hot. The number of people, the television lights, and there's a point where he presses me and throws me to security in the aisle. I'm 253 at the time, and this is after he's thrown me around for 10 or 15 minutes. He walks over, and this one point in the match just catches me. He does all that after he's been throwing this 253-pound guy around for 15 minutes or so. He walks over, puts his hands on the top rope, and he looks right into the hard cam, and he's breathing like this. A little bit of sweat coming down his face. Meanwhile, I'm over there sweating like a pig, sucking wind, looking for an oxygen tank. He was a machine. But his whole take on that match wasn't, hey, Paul, can I keep the belt for longer? He certainly could have gotten the belt over. No, it was business. We're going to do this, go to Pittsburgh, get this huge pop. Again, he was a professional wrestler, knew what was right for business, or good for, it would have been right to keep it on him too, but knew what was going to be good for business in that particular night. So when you see that pop, the biggest in my career, at the end of that match, that's that professional wrestler doing the right thing in Pittsburgh. And when you look at that, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it right now because he would have been well within his rights to say, nah, I don't want to drop it that quick, or this isn't the right business. We've heard so many other people do, and not Bammer. Pure pro.
From your perspective, as we said, I think pretty much the first question I asked you was Kevin Nash said, the only person the Clique ever really dicked around was you. And there's a list out there I'm sure that people can look at, from Bob Holly to, as you mentioned, Dustin Rhodes. But I think it's quite well known out there that Bam Bam may have been one of the victims of the Clique. Do you know what that was about and what they did?
I don't know what they did to him. I'm guessing the same type of thing. But it was sort of like the wolf pack mentality, right? They would come around and they all had Vince's ear. So, and this is being as kind as I can be to Vince, giving him the best potential reason that this happened. I still believe it, part of me, that it was a design plan, at least for me. Excuse me. But when you have that wolf pack mentality and, you're all nipping at the back legs, and, Hunter tells me this last week of me being Vince, and Sean's telling me this today, and tomorrow somebody's telling me something else, and it's just this constant nipping. The thing is, Vince is raised in this business, right? He's certainly aware of the works that go on, the political works. And, you'd have to be asking yourself, if he hired Shane Douglas, the franchise character, there was obviously something. And again, this is taking the flip side, that he had the best intentions. If you hired the franchise, the first thing you do is cut the knees off the franchise, right? Not letting him do what he does best. And then you have this, oh, by the way, you guys are also in contention for these titles and don't like other people. Clearly, you don't like other people like Dustin and Bob Holly and all, and around that belt. He had to know what was going on. Clearly had to see right through that, because Vince, if nothing else, knows the business. The thing about getting to Kevin for a second, my experience around him was like, I've told the story a million times, but about what happened in Montreal with Carl Ouellet. Kevin that night, to be fair, was telling Sean, no, that's not what Vince wants. And that, if I beat him clean, it's not going to work. He was, pushing back. But ultimately, from the outsider looking in, it looked like ultimately Kevin was like a follower, like, following those guys. Would later rear his head as one of the leaders, the NWO and in the Clique. But at that time, he was very much under the thumb of impressionable by Sean for sure, whose work he looked up to. And, the things that I saw, these are the things I can't get inside somebody's head in the reasoning or the thought process, but just the back and forth that I saw and how he finally acquiesced to Sean when Sean kept pressing that, told me that he was like sort of like following, not leading, and later would become more the leader.
Mm-hmm. We will move on to the next question. There's potpourri of questions. And do you know what? I'm actually going to ask this one. I've asked quite a lot of WWF questions. I realise this, but man, I love the WWF, especially in that time, because not that many people were watching, and it sort of feels like it's mine in a sense. It's a bit of the hidden secret with so many talented guys. Anyway, the Christmas in your house, 1995, one of your last appearances, you brought out Buddy Landell to the ring, and to go against Ahmed Johnson instead of you. Were you legitimately injured at this time?
Yes, I had hurt my back, Christmas, so it would have been the week of Thanksgiving in Richmond, Virginia. That's when the ring had, Davey Boy had sunk right through the mat. And
what?
20 minutes.
What's this?
So in Richmond, Virginia, the Monday before Thanksgiving. So Monday was our last day on the road. We would be off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That Friday, back in the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Saturday in the Garden. This was my last week. I'd already put my notice in, had my out. That Vince wanted me to work, and I knew I was going to job on the way out. Newsflash, I've never really beaten anybody, and I've never really lost anybody. We are pro wrestlers, right? So I beat me on the way out, no problem, Vince. Okay, I got to lose. Come on. Jesus. So in Richmond, we had gotten there. This is back when they still did the 1 hour tape, 9 o'clock live, 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, another tape. 20 minutes to 9, I'm the first match with Razor on Raw, live at 9 o'clock. About 20 minutes till 9, Davey Boy's in the ring. If you remember, Davey Boy always stomped with both feet. So he goes to headbutt this guy, and his leg right up to his knees. So he looks like a little 3-foot guy in the ring, the old dwarf thing, right? And of course, they got to stop the match, and like a ton of ring crew converges on the ring, and they're tearing the ring apart and fixing the ring. And as they've tightened the ropes and they've not had a chance to test the ring, the pyro's going off and the music's hitting the anchor, they're diving out of the ring to get out. I didn't pay attention to that. I've looked back. I've since seen this stuff after, gone back and tried to figure out what happened. Razor, one of the things about Scott was that everything he did was the same, like very much like Flair. Skits in his matches, right? So, the whole woo and throw the toothpick in your face, the punch once, punch twice, block, third one, clothesline to the floor. There were all these skits, and you could do the match in your sleep. So we're doing the 3 punches off the ropes, block, hit, off the ropes, block, hit, third one, clothesline over. Well, in a regulation wrestling ring, when I do that, that's the top rope. In any regulation wrestling ring, that's the fulcrum point. So I go back and push the rope down to go over, but the rope is like this, no give. So I go to clear the rope, and I'm teetering. I'm trying to kick myself over, but I'm like sort of balanced on the rope. And again, I've seen this in hindsight. Scott pushes me. As I'm going upside down to the other side, I feel this quick, felt like a kick in my back, right on the spine. I'm like, oh shit, I hit the floor. It hurt like hell, but I'm going to get up. My legs weren't paralyzed. But if I was telling my legs to do this, they were doing this. They weren't doing what I was telling them to do. So I'm like confused. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? The referee sticks his head through the rope. There's a black guy, as I remember. He said, get in the fucking ring. And I said, my fucking legs aren't working. And Scott, to his credit, came right out and said, let's screw it, stop the match. I knew that Vince thought if we stopped that match, I'm boo-boo facing for doing a job or trying to screw him somehow. And he could easily extend that. He was letting me out of the contract. I said, get me in that ring. Let's get this match on. And he argued for a second. And I won the argument. I knew we couldn't stop that match and me not get screwed. So he rolled me back in, and he wanted me to go to slam him. He would small package me. And I knew Vince had called the Razor's Edge. I said, no, give me the edge. Give me the edge. We argued for a second in the ring. If you watch closely, you'll see there's like a hesitation. And he finally picks me up. Now, Scott could do it 2 ways. He could lay you down, like stretch it out and lay you down pretty gently, or spike you. When he did it to me, I thought he spiked me because it felt like I was going to shit my kidneys out. The pain was excruciating. And, but looking back at it, he laid me down as gently as he could, gets his hand raised. They sort of like rolled me out of the ring like a hunk of beef or something. And I plopped down. I can't walk. I'm trying to get him. I'm still confused. Like, what's wrong with my legs? They send some referees down, I forget who, and they help me back. As soon as we get to the curtain, they let me go. I collapsed to the floor. Now, think about this. I don't care if you were at the shopping center and you saw somebody collapse to the floor, you would instantly go, oh my God, are you okay? Right? I mean, you would instinctively, as a human being, just react. Nobody did. And I crawled from gorilla position on my elbows, army style. The Richmond building, where the dressing rooms are from the gorilla position, is probably 150, 200 yards. It's a long haul. So I literally had to crawl past the boys watching the monitor, past all the personnel coming up and down the hall. I'm crawling on my elbows all the way down the hall to the room I'm dressing in with Dustin. As I get there, I go to push it open, and Dustin is opening the door. He sees, oh shit, and he helps me up. And I told him, dude, I'm hurt. Go get a doctor quick. I knew something was wrong. Well, he was gone for several minutes, and he came back with an EMT. The EMT came in and gave me like this quick checkup. He goes, you have a pretty good muscle spasm in your back. Well, I'd never had a muscle spasm in my back, so I thought, well, this guy's an EMT, knows what he's talking about. Flying home that night and flying home the next day, I was in extraordinary pain. And I knew something was wrong, so I didn't go home. I went straight to my doctor's office, Larry Bell. And he checked me out, and he said, same thing. Let's just go home, rest. You know, if it gets worse, go to the emergency room. But he wanted it to calm down and come back after Thanksgiving. So, you know, once that swelling and stuff subsides, you get MRIs get occluded when you're swelled up like that. So now, unfortunately, I got to go on the road. So I told him I got Friday and Saturday on the road. He said, come back on Monday. We'll MRI you then. So I get to the building in Philly, Spectrum. I'm wrestling Savio Vega both nights. Popcorn match, throwaway. And the first night, being in Philly, I pick a chair up, go on the floor, go to hit Savio with it. Of course, the place goes crazy, right? The ECW guy picks a chair up, and the referee pulls it out, and Savio gets the better of me, throws me in. At one point during the match, I had to pull myself up on the ropes. I couldn't stand up. I knew something was wrong. We take the match home, and as I'm coming back, you walk up a ramp in the Spectrum, and Vince is standing there like this. I thought I said no chairs. I said, did I use a chair? Like, shut the fuck up. I didn't use a chair. And me using a chair is me hitting you with a chair, not picking it up going, hey, everybody, a chair. So now I got one more night. That night in Philadelphia, we stayed at the Old Comfort Inn, me and my driver, Damian Farron, who passed away a couple of years ago. He was the merchandise manager for ECW. I took 30 Percocets that night, not all at once, and drank a case of beer, just trying to get some sleep. I was in so much pain. Slept in the fetal position. Didn't get a minute of sleep. The next day, driving up the New Jersey Turnpike, pothole central, right, Democratic State, and it's like somebody got a knife in my back, turning it. And we finally get there. I'm thinking, this is my last match. Just get in here, do whatever I have to do, get the hell out of here, and be done. So we walk in. Damien comes up at the hallway in the garden. The elevator you get off is down at the far side of this V. There's a payphone right in the middle, and all the dressing rooms are over on this side and the gorilla position over there. Couch right by the elevator. So Damien sits there. He's not going to watch the show. And so I go into the dressing room, and I go to sit down. The commissioned doctor in New York is sitting in the middle with a couple chairs, giving somebody a physical. I grab the coat hook and I slide myself gently down. It was like a knife in my back. And as soon as my ass hits the bench, the doctor says, okay, you're next. Bret Hart was on the left side of the room, my left. Isaac Yankem, Glenn Jacobs on the right, just young, a kid at that time. So I walk over and I sit down in the doctor's chair. I wince. And he said, what's wrong? I told him all that I just told you. So he proceeds to give me like an actual real medical physical. And like 15, 20 minutes. And he said, 23 years as a commissioned doctor, I've never done what I'm about to do. I said, what's that? He said, I'm failing you. You can't wrestle. This is turning into a nightmare, right? I said, Doc, this is my last night working with this asshole. It's fake wrestling. What's the worst thing that can happen? His reply to me was, you could end up sexually dysfunctional in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or both. I went, well, that's the magic phrase. I'm done. And so I walk over, and here comes Tony Gurria, who I do not like. The guy's an asshole. And he walks in, he's standing over. Remember, I can't stand. I'm sitting there in pain. He's standing over with his little grin on his face, like he's got me somehow. He goes, Dean, you don't want to wrestle for Vince tonight? Now, I had just come from ECW, where I'd proven for 7 years, working with broken bones and 3 days after surgery and everything else, unlike a fluffer like him. And I said, unlike you, Tony, I said, I'm more than man enough to go to that ring. I said, you get that doctor to approve it, I'll show you how a real man does this. He looked at Brett, looked at Isaac, and he went, and I feel my fuse starting to go. I don't know if you knew this about me. I used to have a pretty good temper, still do, but I sort of keep it hidden now and then. And I can feel my fuse burning, and I know it's going to happen. They push me too far, I'm going to blow. So I hear a few minutes later, get Dean Douglas in my office right this minute. That was it. I was done. I thought there was one man that could yell at me like that. His name was George Martin, and he was in a grave since 1993. I pulled myself up, and I thought, I'm knocking this fuck out. Kevin Kelly's always been like a huge inspiration to me, right, when he pulled and beating Vince's ass. So I walk in, and literally Blackjack Mulligan, or not Mulligan, Blackjack Lanza, Rene Goulet, Strongbow, Jim Ross, JJ. There's a room full of people, right? So I can't obviously knock the guy out. The doctor was this tiny guy. His hands, when I shook his hand, I felt like Andre, like this. And the face looked familiar to me, and I couldn't figure out. I just figured commissioned doctor. I've already seen him here before. So he walks in. Now Vince is standing. I'm standing looking. Here's Vince on my right. The doctor. Now Vince is a big guy, like 6'3". He's looking down at this doctor, but he's like lording over him like this, looking right down at him. And he says to the doctor, so what seems to be the problem? The doctor starts giving him his medical explanation. This young man presents with asymmetrical. Stop. This is his words. I'm a dumb fuck that doesn't understand medicalese. So give it to me in layman's terms that a dumb fuck like me can understand it. Now I'm watching him like right here in front of me, like this. The doctor says, okay, this young man presents with no reflexes in his left side. And the only thing that would cause that is a ruptured disc or a broken back or both. Barring a CAT scan or an MRI, I can't in good conscience approve him to go to the ring. And Vince asks the same thing. He said, what's the worst thing that can happen? He said, this young man could end up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. I'm looking at Vince. He didn't even blink when this guy said that. So he turns to me now, and he comes up. Our chests were touching. That's how close we were, like this. And he goes, Dean, you agree with that diagnosis? Now, remember, I would have knocked this guy out. So I went like this to get him out of my vision so I didn't have to see that fucking face in front of me. I put my hand on his chest, and I pushed him away. I said, I'm not qualified to agree or disagree with that diagnosis. And Vince did this little hissy fit dance. Like he looked like this and turned in the corner circle, and he walked intentionally towards me and shoulder thumped me, like tackling me. And it twisted me. The doctor had to grab me. But when he did, it turned me. So now I'm looking at him walking out into the hallway. He stops in the hallway, walks back in, and this is what he says to the doctor. Remember, Savio and I had a popcorn match. It's a throwaway. Come on back from getting your popcorn and hot dogs. The matches are back on. And my last match here. And this doctor, who I would later find out was a world-renowned neurosurgeon named Dr. Richard Byrer. The reason I knew him was he had a show on A&E at the time that I was always watching, wanting to be a doctor. And he walks back in, and he tells the doctor, give yourself a pat on the back, Doc, because you just fucked 25,000 of your fellow New Yorkers out of the most important match on the card. Now, I know the doctor didn't get it, but I got it. And he walks out. A few minutes later, Arnold Skolin comes up and says, hey, Vince wanted me to give you a verbatim message, and he's trying to remember it in pieces. He goes, Vince told me to, these are Vince's words, get your fucking bag, get the fuck out of the garden. Oh, yeah. He doesn't need your motherfucking services anymore. Went, okay. And I went to walk away, and he grabbed me, touched my elbow, and he went like this to make sure nobody could hear me, leaned in, and he went, you ask me, kids are doing the right thing, take care of your back. So I nudged him with my elbow, and I said, I always knew there was a reason I respected you, Arnie, but I'm curious, why'd you whisper that? Right. So now we go, my friend Damien is waiting on the couch. So we go down, get my bag. I walk in. As the elevator doors close, remember the hallway like this, they're all the way over here. Vince's office is way down by the grill position. The door is closing, and I hear Vince yelling down the hall, Bean, Bean, Bean. And the elevator gets right here. He sticks his fingers in, and the door opens back up. I'm like, son of a bitch, I was that close. Door opens back up, and he goes, Dean, where are you going? You're advertised now. You got to make an appearance. And I said, I did the same thing. I said, I was told to get my fucking bag, get the fuck out of the arena. I looked around, I went, you don't need my motherfucking services anymore. And he went, who said I said that? I didn't say that. He said, you're out of here. He goes, why don't you do one of those suit promos you're supposedly so famous for? I looked at him and I went, okay. I could feel the horns coming and the tail growing, right? So I walk out. I gave my T-shirt to Baby Earl, put the robe on, and I go to the ring. And now I'm going to shove this up Vince's ass. You know, the director you can't see is always right at the stage left ring post. And of course, I was not allowed to cut the fucking music there, right? So I go and cut the fucking music, and the guys want to shake me up. So I said, the Dean has some good news, and I've got some bad news. I said, I'll give you the bad news first. You 25,000 New Yorkers that spent your hard-earned dollars to come here tonight to see professional wrestling just got fucked because the only real wrestler on the card isn't performing. I said, but that's the good news. The good news is Vince McMahon and his cronies against world-renowned neurosurgeon Dr. Richard Byers' advice that I could have a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And I pause, and I look in the camera. I said, I told him he could kiss my fucking ass and throw the microphone down. Now, gently, gingerly get out of the ring and go back. I'm in no shape to fight at this point. But I expect coming through that curtain, someone's going to come at me, right? So I'm ready to throw and block the best I can. And I come through. To this day, I have no idea where they went. There were no human beings in the dressing room area. Gone. Nobody in the office, nobody in the hallway, gorilla position, dressing room. So I walked down, and my buddy Damien sitting on the couch going, you asshole, why'd you do that? And I said to leave now, but never work for him again, and I never have. And I've told Vince through Tommy and other people, tell Vince, no heat. I appreciate him keeping me in mind, but not working for him anymore. And I haven't. I've lived up to that. There's no reason to ever be put in that position in our business. So you go later and you think of things like my friend Owen falling 9 stories to his death and so many other things, Mick's ear getting ripped off and things like that. That kind of stuff to me should never, ever in a million years happen in professional wrestling. And that was my attempt then in 95 to try to stop the insanity like that. We're human beings. I got the rest of my life. I got a family I got to feed. I really can't be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And sorry, if that makes me a prick, I guess I'm a prick. What I should have done in hindsight, again, the old steamboat thing, right? I should have gone to the ring and locked up and went, oh my God, I'm hurt. And, but again, like the temper just got the better of me at that point.
When Vince walked past you and shoulder barged you, you should have fallen down, shit your pants, and sued him for $5 million.
Yeah, well, whatever in that rumor said, I never saw Vince anywhere near him. Yeah. It's all the cronies back there, but just a bizarre place. And when I got into wrestling, again, as an educated guy and a guy that planned on working in Harrisburg or Washington D.C., I probably would have seen worse in those fields. But I could not imagine somebody being so callous to another human being. You just had surgery. I could never see myself going, sorry, James, we need you to work this popcorn match where you might end up crippled for the rest of your life. But hey, it's just wrestling. Give us the best job you can out there. It's callous. It's unprofessional. To me, it's inhuman. And I'm sure if there were other guys there, I know it's happened to other guys. But I also know that a lot of guys self-censor themselves because in some way they conjure images in there. Maybe Vince will call tomorrow. It's like, Vince don't call tomorrow.
The Dennis Stamp jumping on a trampoline, doing weird weights when he's 55. You never know when Vince might call, that kind of thing. Do you know, actually, the next question actually leads into it. This chap has asked, any memories of your WWF Germany Austria tour? And I believe I've heard a story similar to that where the boys were trying to pressure you to work even though you were injured there as well.
Yeah. It's I think I did work there, but I was being I can't remember now what the injury was, but Yeah, I was working because I remember the night in Vienna, Austria. I remember the dean is supposed to be the world's smartest man at that time, 7 PhDs. I've since earned 3 more, so now it's 10 PhDs. That's neither here nor there. Not that I'm smarter than anybody or anything. So I figured, well, we're in a hotbed of history here in Vienna, Austria, right? So Tony Gurria again, prior to this and after this, but when I was there, it was always Tony Gurria was on the heel bus, Rene Goulet was on the babyface bus. And the reason was Tony's a prick, Sarge is a sweetheart. Everybody loves Sarge. So I'd already had some run-ins with him earlier in that tour, and excuse me, my coffee is giving me the belches, but he had kept pressuring me in Vienna, Austria. What are you going to say in your promo? What are you going to say in your promo? And I really couldn't think of anything. And I'm, Austria, I'm like, hey, something in my head, and I thought, Hitler. This is where Hitler came from, right? So I go to the ring and I say, I'll think of it on the way. I know I was going to say that to him. I knew he'd shoot it down. But I mean, it's patently absurd for the world's smartest man, 7 PhDs, one in history, by the way, that I wouldn't say something about this, right? And so I would start off every night in some German. I said, Ich spreche English, das ist besser. I'll speak English, this is better, which obviously is going to piss people off, right? And I said, the dean has come to Vine for a reason. And I'm looking at the place. I said, I wanted to look in the eyes of the people that spawned Adolf Hitler. And I mean, you could have heard a fart in church there. It was, and I come back and he's like, don't ever say that again. But that night in that building, as I was last coming out, the dressing room was upstairs. And I'm coming down the stairs and he's on the payphone to Vince. I'd watched all the matches that night, and you could see who was working hard and who wasn't working hard. And he buried everybody on the card except for the Clique. It went out of his way. They were great. They were the only ones that worked hard and that kind of stuff. And when I came down the stairs, I glared at him like, boy, you got some fucking balls, right? And I think it was like that moment, the next morning or the morning after when the incident happened, we're on the bus. They gave you a call time that you had to have your stuff on the bus. Then the bus would leave like an hour later. We're all on the bus. Our stuff's on the bus. I'm waiting for breakfast. And, I'm sorry, that would be the next day. We're waiting on the bus, and it's supposed to be like a 9 a.m. leaving time. At 11, the Clique comes walking out. And, you can imagine everyone in that bus is livid, right? We want to get on the road and get going, and we're doing this crap. The next morning, same thing. I drop my bags off, and I go in to get my breakfast order, and I'm waiting. Now, in Europe, they always have, like in these hotels, they have a great big, like convention room almost. Where they have the breakfast bar set up. So I'm in there waiting for my eggs and my Spiegelei, and I am drinking orange juice. And Tony Gurria comes in and yells across the room. Now, this is 24 hours after we waited for 2 hours. It's still like 40 minutes at the bus time leaving. And he yells across the room full of people, Dean, let's fucking go, Dean. I didn't know, motherfucker. I threw the smash on the wall. I started after he took off. And from that point forward, we had Sarge on our bus. And so the baby faces on that tour, I apologize to you that you had the moron on your bus, but rest of the tour was great with Sarge.
What is it with Tony Gurria? Because, I mean, the only thing I've ever heard about him is Mr. Personality, in quotation marks. But yeah.
So I could give you a lot of these examples. I just gave you the one in the garden in Erie, Pennsylvania. My ex-wife did not like professional wrestling. She didn't like being around most of the wrestlers. Like my friends and stuff, she liked, but she was just not comfortable going there. She never watched wrestling and never really, keep in mind that her take on wrestling was me always being wheeled into an operating room and sitting around in pain all the time and always being gone. So wrestling wasn't high on her list of things. In Erie, it's a very small arena. I think it holds like 7,000 or 8,000 people. And they had an area like right as you came out the curtain, there was a little area down here like where the wives and friends and stuff would sit. So I'd left her there because I knew I was going to be done pretty early. And to get her up there, they always went to Lake Erie when they were kids, and there was an Italian restaurant there in town she loved. I said, let's go. I'll be done early, and then we'll head to the restaurant. So I go out after I'm done. I'm showered. I go out. No Carla. So I go back in there. She went to the bathroom or get a Coke or something. 20 minutes go by. I go back out again. No Carla. So I'm back again. Like another 20, 30 minutes, I go back, still no Carla. Now I'm panicked. I'm thinking, like, did my wife go to the bathroom and somebody grab her? Like, what the hell's going on? I'm panicked. I don't think we had cell phones yet. So I probably tried to call her. But anyway, I'm asking her. And it seemed like the brown-haired lady, she was sitting right here. And the one wife said to me, oh, Tony Garea made her move. I went, huh? I said, yeah, Tony made her move. She later told me, made her move all the way up into the rafter seats. And I went right up to him that night. I said, you ever tell my fucking wife to move again, I'll whoop your fucking ass. I mean, I just had it at that point. You know, that kind of shit. He was always like one of those assholes. Like, and I'd heard stories, right, from the older guys, Bruno and Dominic, about that shit. He was a stooge, always wanted stooging on the boys. Where I came from, what Dominic told me to never do that. Like, always stay true to the boys. And just like one of those types of guys that I guess didn't feel confident enough on his in-ring ability that figured he had to stooge or do something else. Because that's always been my take on those guys. If you don't feel comfortable enough that you can make it in that ring, that you got to stab your friends in the back, and you obviously shouldn't be in that ring.
Hey, it got him 5 different WWF tag team title runs with like 5 different or 4 different partners or whatever.
WWF. I mean, there's a few stories out there about that, but we won't talk about that.
Oh, for God's sake, we've got 9 minutes.
Yeah, we'll talk about it allegedly, allegedly, but we'll allegedly talk off camera.
I'm looking forward to that. Right, we've got about 9 minutes left, so I've got a couple of extra questions. To be honest, most of them are WWF. I might as well stick with WWF. Or actually, I'll just go completely off that and not stick with WWF because I have no more WWF questions. Here is my question to you. Have you ever refused to lose to somebody?
The only time, and it wasn't even refusing, it was the angle itself, was when I came back from WWF to ECW. And again, this was my fuck up. When I had left, my take on that ECW title was to legitimize that belt as much as we could, right? With the throwdown and everything else. It was, and I'm channeling stuff that I've seen Bruno do and talk about, Harley do and talk about, Dominic do and talk about, all these guys that I really looked up to and idolized. And I came back and they had the title on Sandman. And like my take on it was that Sandman didn't need the title. He was sort of like an Andre gimmick, like in our show. But he also, and he'll be the first to tell you, he's not a wrestler, right? So at that time, there was this, huge divide between us. My being a prick, and his being pissed at me being a prick. And the funny part is now, we love each other. We laugh with each other now. It's always great to see him, and I think he'd say the same thing. But at that time, there was a lot going on there. But it wasn't just Sandman. I came back and I saw. Mikey Whipwreck, this little, again, from the outside look, like just coming in and not understanding them. And the Dudleys, right? One black guy, one white guy. They're supposedly brothers with glasses, no lenses in them. It looked like phony, corny WWE wrestling to me. And I was like, ooh, man, some things have changed here. Some things for the better, I guess. The Eliminators I thought were phenomenal. And I thought that about the Dudleys till about 2 seconds into the first time I saw them working. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Great. And the same stuff with Sandman, but that was the only time I refused to do an angle and a program with somebody because I was watching people getting hurt. One night I saw in Middletown, New York, I saw Meanie. Everybody loves Meanie. He's just a sweetheart.
Dude, I love Meanie as well. He's a lovely guy, Meanie. Fantastic guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you say something bad about Meanie, there's probably something wrong with you, right? So he comes back and I'm without my glasses, seeing him, going like this, just pissed off. I'm watching it. He gets like closer to me and he walks in between me. He is beat to hell. I mean, bloody here. And it's just like somebody went out there and tortured him. And I went over and grabbed what he goes, he didn't complain to me about it, but I took him right to Paul and I said, do you condone this? I mean, this guy was basically tortured in the ring, right? And I made him pay him double that night. And that was the kind of stuff that, like, we was at Loggerheads with me and Sandman. And it had gotten to a point because of his drinking where Bama refused to work with him, Taz refused to work with him, Candido, Perry, me. I mean, there was like a long list of the top guys that were refusing to work with him because he'd broken my knuckles one time. I had Tommy in a sleeper from the apron, ran in and interfered in the match. He was supposed to come from the floor and hit me like this to drop the hold and take off running. Instead, he got up on the apron, and I'm thinking, I can't see him. I've got Tommy in the sleeper facing the hard cam. He comes behind and swings like a baseball bat, hits me in the back of the head so hard that the kendo stick wrapped around mine and Tommy's head and broke these two knuckles. I was like, how do you hit somebody that hard, right? And, again, just coming from two different places into the business, I'll be the first to tell you, Sandman was an amazing attraction for ECW. Put a lot of people in those stands. And it finally hit me why. I'm looking around and I'm thinking, he's them. They're all him. I mean, it was incongruous. But, it's like I said, we get along. We were just together last weekend, and I actually had to apologize to the vendor. I said, I'm sorry, because me, him, and Francine together, we sit and laugh like three morons for 3 days. And I said, I'm sorry. He goes, no, I think the fans like that. But that's just us today getting along.
I'm hopefully coming to America this year, so I'll have to coincide it somehow with either coming to West Virginia, if you're doing like a thing for Moose or something. Yeah. So I'll have to come and say hello in person.
Well, this is the first I'm going to break. I won't reveal it all, but very soon, within the next month or two, we're going to be revealing some pretty big stuff coming up here in America and wherever else. There is something next year that's pretty prodigious. I'll tell you off camera, as long as you promise never not to stooge it here, but I'll come back on here and give it to you first, to your listeners first.
I'll tell you what, I have no wrestling friends. I have no one to tell. So
Plus, I know the country you live in. I'll send the hitman and the franchise hitman after.
Listen, we've got a few minutes left, so I think I'll squeeze in one more question before you're given the old crook and yanked off stage sort of thing. And Mick Foley, I've never asked you about Mick, really, in this 4 interviews now that we've done. And obviously yours and Mick's careers started together, intertwined, intersect at various times, and you're associated with each other sort of infinitely throughout time in the wrestling business. Yeah. As 2 young guys are probably roughly around the same age, you obviously saw Cactus when he was Cactus, taking these horrific falls, putting his body through all this kind of thing. I'm sure as a fellow young person, you know you have to get noticed one way or another, but did you ever have a word with Mick and just say, even with your experience, you really need to tone this down for your health long term?
Yeah, not so direct as that, but I know when we were younger, this was like a big, we always traveled together, and it was an old silver car there was more garbage in it. Garbage about halfway up the floorboards, but newsflash: Mick ain't the fanciest or neatest guy, but he's an amazing talent, right? I mean, he's a very, very intelligent guy, an amazing talent. Hated the gym, could not stand to go to the gym, and back then this was land of the giants, right? The bodies, and I would finally yank him into a gym someplace, and he'd sit over there and ride the bike like this, look around and stare, and I don't think you're getting much from that. But boy, he really did make a huge splash, but it really jeopardized his health in doing it. And that bump off in Pittsburgh off the cage, Dominic actually had gone that night. I don't think Mick was aware of that, but he had gone with friends and sat up in the stands, and he of course didn't want to go into the dressing room. He don't get along with Vince either, or didn't for some reason. But when he saw Mick do it, he got pissed. Now, Dominic did not train us differently. He didn't say, okay, Mick, you're going to be the guy that takes the crazy bumps, and Shane, you're going to be the technician and whatever. He trained us all the same. And, to me, my take on it, in my opinion, jeopardizing your health for this business. Again, that to me, the professional side of professional wrestling is we're working people. Working meaning I'm not really killing you, you're not really killing me, and I'm certainly not going to cripple you or me in the process. Top 3 rules when we were breaking into wrestling: take care of your opponent, take care of yourself, take care of each other. And then everything came after that. And yet still injuries could happen. So, doing that, if you watch that bump again, Mick isn't the most graceful guy. And when you jump off something that far and that kind of a distance, gravity's going to grab your ass, right? And when you do, you might be aiming for here and very likely hit here or here. He is less than 12 inches from that railing, the bicycle rack, holding the fans back. Had he hit that going down, without question, he would have been maimed, and quite likely could have, jeopardized his life. And to me, that was just a little bit too far. Now, far be it, he's made a lot of money with that, and I said earlier about like how the other guys, I think before we went on the air, how they must feel. I didn't do that kind of stuff. I was the guy that was like sort of the technician guy. So, I can't even, and I hurt. Like, my knees hurt, my back hurts, my neck hurts. I can't imagine how Mick Foley must feel right now. Just on a day, like an hour-to-hour basis, it's got to be excruciating. And he's made a lot of money for it, but I wonder in the over and under, is it worth that? I have two kids that I still, I've got a 17-year-old still at home. And I've relished being able to go in the backyard and throw the football with them and play Nerf guns with them and stuff like that. I doubt that Mick could do that, at least, to have fun with it because of how he must feel. And then, the whole point of CTE, which I think is incredibly prescient. We didn't know about it then, we do now. And I'm concerned, because you forget where your keys are. Oh my God, there's something wrong. And things like that. I love the guy. We broke in together at a time when if you'd have told us that we were going to both be champions down the road and anybody would even know who the hell we were, we'd have called you crazy, right? And, we had spent a large portion of our careers, early part of our careers, till about the time he was going to the WWF. And a bit after that, we would call each other and say, hey, they put me into this angle and they want to do this character with me or whatever. And we would kick stuff back and forth like that. And it had gotten to a point when he went to the WWF and he never was rude or never came off and said, hey, screw you, so you know what you're talking about. It just somehow became apparent to me that he really didn't want to broach into that. Like, okay, let's talk about the kids and let's talk about the wives and the weather, but let's not talk about that. And so I stayed back out of that. I just saw him last week at the Expo. Again, busy, both of us, but the chance to say hello. I don't want to see anything happen to Mick. I don't want to see anything happen to Flair. I don't want to see anything happen to Vince. I sure as hell don't want to see anything happen to me. We've seen plenty of that. And I think it's time for us to all grow older and fatter and wrinklier as we go on. And we can go to these for a lot longer and say hello to each other and give each other a hug.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Dante Martins and all these wrestlers who are in their 20s doing ridiculous stuff now to get noticed that no one remembers anymore, Mick Foley took unprotected headshots for how many years, Nestia plunges for how many years, Hell in a Cell and other terrible bumps, and he made the most money with a sock puppet. That is the lesson to take.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I know because I couldn't imagine it then either. There's going to come a point when you're like me, 39 years old, and trailing out of your career, you get up every morning and you got to live in this world. You got to go to the grocery store and go to the airport and do those things. And every step you take, you realize it and you feel it. Take care of your bodies. And it's so important, so critical. Take care of your bodies and be able to get to this point of being the ripe old age of 39 and still throwing the football with your kids.
Absolutely. We have reached our time, Shane. It is always a pleasure, never a chore, as we say here. Give us some plugs just before we go. So your social medias, anything else you want to get out there?
Yeah, the franchise's friends on Twitter. We're still pushing this thing along, and it's getting. I don't know. So Elon Musk just announced this new thing of for a year taking no money. Whatever Twitter takes in gets sent right to the vendors for your original content. We've got a show, me and Francine. The original run of it, it's me, Francine, Luke Williams, and the Nasty Boys. Just sitting around and throwing questions around. And what we've done is, the taping took about 2 or 3 hours, but we pitched them up each question and keep it around 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes, so you can get on and watch it quick and get these guys' takes on things. And so franchises, friends, people check that out. My Twitter account and my Facebook account have both been hijacked. I don't know by who, so I'm working on getting those all back. But
Francine,
it's always a pleasure.
It was Francine.
that evil Francine, right? The Snidely Whiplash. Can't trust her. But no, it's in fact, as you saw, the phone was ringing as you and I first sat down, and it was Francine calling in. So yeah, it's get a chance. Like I said, we'll be on here. We'll make sure I do it with you when we first announce this. We've got something pretty big in the plans for the next year or so, and I think the fans will be quite interested to hear what it is when we finally finalize it. We're working on all the backbone stuff right now and getting it down and ixnaying that and bringing that in. But I think it'll be pretty exciting for your fans to hear this, and we'll be excited to tell it. So we'll do that here first.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to hearing what it is in 2 minutes as well. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Shane, and we'll catch you again for episode 5.
Appreciate you guys.